The night was colder than usual at Windsor Castle. James Carter stood at his post near the royal stables, his breath forming small clouds in the February air. He had been a royal guard for 3 years, and most nights passed without incident. But tonight felt different. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard. James checked his watch. 2:30 in the morning? In the distance, he heard something that made his spine stiffen. A noise, faint but deliberate. Metal scraping against wood. His hand moved instinctively to his radio, but he paused. False alarms were embarrassing. He needed to be sure. James moved quietly toward the stables, his boots careful on the cold stone. The grand building loomed ahead, its wooden doors slightly ajar. They shouldn't be. His heart began to race. Protocol was clear. Alert command first, investigate second. But something made him hesitate. What if it was just a horse? What if it was one of the stable hands working late? Then he heard it again. Footsteps. Human footsteps. Inside the stables, James pressed himself against the stone wall, his pulse hammering in his ears. Through the gap in the door, he could see a beam of light dancing across the interior. A flashlight. Someone was definitely inside. Before you hear what happens next, if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. We share real stories from behind palace walls that most people never get to hear. James finally reached for his radio, his fingers fumbling slightly with cold and adrenaline. But before he could press the button, another sound cut through the night. Footsteps running, coming from the direction of the royal residence. He turned. Squinting into the darkness, a figure emerged from the shadows, moving with surprising speed and purpose. As the person came closer, James felt his breath catch in his throat. He recognized that silhouette, that distinctive way of moving. It was Princess Anne. She wasn't wearing royal attire. She had on riding boots, dark trousers, and a heavy jacket. Her hair was pulled back, and her face was set with an expression James had never seen on any royal before. Pure determination mixed with controlled fury. She didn't slow down as she approached. Instead, she looked directly at James and gave a single, sharp nod. Then she did something that would become burned into his memory forever. Princess Anne walked straight toward the stable doors and pushed them, open with both hands. The doors swung wide with a heavy creak. Inside, the flashlight beam froze. Someone gasped. "I know you're in here." Anne's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "You have 5 seconds to show yourself." James stood frozen, his training colliding with the surreal reality of watching a member of the royal family confront an intruder alone. Should he rush in? Should he call for backup? Should he protect the princess? A shadow moved inside the stables, then another. James's blood ran cold. There wasn't just one intruder. There were 2. Anne took 3 steps forward into the stable. Her voice dropped lower, more dangerous. For seconds, James finally found his voice. "Your Royal Highness, please step back." "Let me." She held up one hand, silencing him without even looking in his direction. Her eyes were locked on the darkness ahead. 3 seconds. The beam of the flashlight suddenly swung toward the back exit. Someone was making a run for it. The sound of hay being kicked up, a horse whinnying in protest, and then the thundering of boots on wood filled the air. Anne moved like lightning. She grabbed a lead rope from a hook on the wall and sprinted deeper into the stables. James rushed in behind her, his own flashlight now out, illuminating the chaos unfolding before him. What he saw next would change everything he thought he knew about royalty. Duty and courage. The stable was a maze of shadows and movement. James's flashlight caught glimpses of the intruders. 2 men, both dressed in dark clothing, both panicking. One was trying to climb over a stall door. The other had dropped something that clattered loudly on the floor. Tools. They had brought tools. Anne was faster than both of them. She moved with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life around horses and knew every inch of these stables. She cut off the first man's escape route, positioning herself between him and the back door. "You picked the wrong place," she said, her voice steady. "And the wrong night." The man froze. He was young, maybe in his 20s, with wide eyes that darted between Anne and James. His partner, older and stockier, managed to get over the stall door, but was now cornered by one of the horses. The animal, a magnificent chestnut mare, was spooked and stamping nervously. James finally found his training. He spoke into his radio, his voice urgent but controlled. Code red at the royal stables. 2 intruders. Princess Anne on site. Need immediate backup. The response was instant. Copy that. Units en route. 8 to 3 minutes. 3 minutes felt like an eternity. The younger intruder suddenly lunged toward a side door James hadn't noticed. Anne reacted without hesitation. She moved to block him, the lead rope still in her hand. The man tried to push past her, but Anne stood her ground. She used the man's momentum against him, stepping aside at the last second and letting him stumble forward into a pile of hay bales. "Stay down," Anne commanded. But the man scrambled to his feet, breathing hard. His eyes locked on James, calculating. The guard was armed. The princess was not. He made his choice. He ran straight at it. Time seemed to slow. James saw it happening, saw the man's intentions clear on his face. He moved forward, shouting, but Anne was already reacting. She swung the lead rope in a wide arc. The metal clip at the end caught the man's shoulder, and he cried out, stumbling sideways. Then Anne did something that made James's jaw drop. She grabbed the man's jacket and used a move that could only have come from years of handling difficult horses. She twisted, used his weight, and sent him sprawling face first onto the stable floor. "I told you to stay down," she said calmly, pressing one boot between his shoulder blades. The older intruder, seeing his partner subdued, made a desperate move. He vaulted over the stall door, away from the nervous horse, and sprinted for the main entrance. He was heading straight for James. The guard stepped forward, reaching for the man, but his boots slipped slightly on loose hay. The intruder saw the opening and veered around him, bursting out into the courtyard. "Don't just stand there." Anne's voice cracked like a whip through the cold air. "Arrest him." The words jolted James into action. He took off running, his boots pounding on cobblestone as he chased the fleeing man across the courtyard. Behind him, he could hear Anne's voice, still commanding, still in control, calling instructions to someone else who must have arrived. The older intruder was fast, but James was faster. Years of physical training kicked in. He closed the distance, his breath coming in sharp bursts. The man glanced back, eyes wild with fear, and made a mistake. He looked behind instead of ahead. His foot caught on an uneven stone. He stumbled, arms windmilling, and went down hard. James was on him in seconds, pulling the man's arms behind his back and holding him firm against the ground. "Don't move," James ordered, his voice harder than he'd ever heard it. The sound of running boots filled the courtyard. 4 royal protection officers appeared, followed by 2 more guards. They took over quickly, securing the intruder and helping James to his feet. "The other one?" an officer asked. "Still in the stable," James replied, catching his breath. With Princess Anne, they rushed back to find Anne standing calmly beside the younger intruder, who was now sitting with his back against a stall door, looking thoroughly defeated. She had somehow found zip ties and secured his wrists behind him. A stable hand stood nearby, looking shocked and confused, holding a pitchfork like a weapon. Anne looked up as the officers entered. Her expression was composed, almost serene. "Gentlemen, thank you for arriving so promptly." She glanced at James, and for just a moment, he saw something in her eyes. Approval. "I see we managed just fine." What happened in the next few minutes would become the talk of the entire royal household. The lead protection officer, a man named Collins, whom James had only seen from a distance before, approached Anne with obvious concern. "Your Royal Highness, are you injured?" "Did either of them—" "I'm perfectly fine, Collins," and interrupted, brushing hay off her jacket. "Though I can't say the same for these 2 gentlemen. They've had a rather difficult evening." She said it so matter-of-factly that for a moment nobody spoke. Then Collins cleared his throat, clearly struggling with protocol. How does one reprimand a princess for confronting intruders alone? Ma'am, with all due respect, that was extremely dangerous. If you had been hurt but I wasn't. Anne walked over to the chestnut mare, who was still agitated, and began stroking her neck with gentle, practiced movements. And if I had waited for protocol, they would have been gone with whatever they came for. Speaking of which, she pointed to a corner of the stable where the drop tools lay scattered. James moved closer with his flashlight. Wire cutters. A small crowbar. A bag that looked empty but smelled of oats. His stomach dropped as he understood. They were after the horses, he said quietly. Anne nodded, her jaw tight. Columbus, specifically. Someone paid them to either steal him or harm him. She continued stroking the mare, but her voice had turned cold. The mare was making noise, defending her stablemate. That's what I heard from my window. Collins was already on his radio, calling in a full security sweep. The younger intruder on the floor looked up at Anne, his face pale. We weren't going to hurt it. We were just supposed to let it loose. Someone said it was a prank. They paid us £5,000. A prank. Anne's voice could have frozen water. Breaking into royal property, traumatizing valuable animals, endangering lives. Quite the sense of humor someone has. She turned to James. You, the guard who actually did his job and chased down the runner. What's your name? James straightened instinctively. James Carter, ma'am. Carter? You hesitated when you first heard them. Wasn't a question. James felt his face flush with shame. She'd seen him standing there, frozen, unsure. Yes, ma'am, I did. I should have called it in immediately. Anne studied him for a long moment. The stable was filling with personnel now. Lights were being set up. The two intruders were being formally arrested and read their rights. But in that moment it felt like only the two of them existed. Do you know why I was awake? An asked James shook his head. I have trouble sleeping sometimes. Old habit from years of competition training, early mornings, late nights. I was reading near the window when I heard the mare. At first, I thought it was nothing. Just an animal being restless. But something felt wrong. Right. She paused. That instinct, Carter. That feeling that something isn't right. Trust it. Always. But I waited too long. You secured the situation before acting. That's not always wrong. Tonight, your caution meant I could approach without alerting them that security was already aware. If they'd heard your radio, they might have run immediately or done something desperate. She glanced at the tools on the ground. Something worse. James hadn't thought of it that way. Around them, the stable was becoming a crime scene. Photographs were being taken. Statements were being prepared. But Anne wasn't finished. However, she continued, her tone shifting, when action is required, it must be swift. When I told you to arrest that man, you moved. That's what matters. You didn't question. You didn't debate. You acted. Collins approached again, this time with a blanket. Ma'am, you should really get inside. You'll catch cold, and the Queen will... The Queen will what, Collins? Be upset that I protected my own horses. And accepted the blanket but didn't move toward the exit. I'll go inside when I'm satisfied that Columbus and the others are calm and secure. Not before? Wasn't a request. Collins nodded and stepped back. James watched as Anne moved from stall to stall, checking each horse personally, speaking to them softly, ensuring they were calm. She didn't do it like someone performing a duty. She did it like someone who genuinely cared. Like these animals were family. One of the younger officers whispered to James, Is she always like this? I don't know, James admitted. I've never seen her like this. She's incredible. That was the word. Incredible. Not in the distant, ceremonial way James had always thought of royalty, but incredible in a real human, powerful way. She had faced danger head-on. She had protected what mattered to her. She had commanded respect not because of her title, but because of her actions. By the time Anne finally agreed to return to the residence, it was nearly 4 a.m. James stood at attention as she passed, Collins and 2 other officers flanking her. She stopped in front of him. Carter. Yes, ma'am, you did well tonight. Don't doubt that. She held his gaze. And don't doubt yourself. You have good instincts. Use them." Then she was gone, walking back across the courtyard with the same purposeful stride she'd had when she'd arrived. James stood there, exhausted, exhilarated, and fundamentally changed. But the night wasn't over yet. James was finishing his statement to the senior security officer when Collins pulled him aside. The older man's expression was unreadable, which made James nervous. In the Royal Protection Service, unreadable usually meant trouble. "Walk with me, Carter." They moved away from the activity around the stables, toward the outer wall of the courtyard. The sun was starting to hint at its arrival, turning the sky a deep purple. Collins stopped and turned to face James directly. "That was your first real incident, wasn't it?" "Yes, sir. How do you feel?" James wasn't sure how to answer that. Proud? Terrified? Guilty for his initial hesitation. "I feel like I should have done more, sir." Collins surprised him by smiling slightly. "That's a good answer. Shows you're thinking." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What you witnessed tonight stays quiet. Understand, sir? The press can't know that Princess Anne confronted intruders alone. They'll turn it into a circus. Questions about security protocols, debates about royal safety, headlines about danger at Windsor. The palace doesn't need that attention, and neither does she." James nodded slowly. "I understand. The official report will say that security responded to suspicious activity. Intruders were apprehended, and the royal family was never in danger, which technically is accurate enough." Collins looked toward the residence. "But between us? What you saw tonight is who she really is. Not many people get to see that. She was remarkable, sir. She's always been remarkable. Most people just don't notice." Collins checked his watch. "You're off duty as of 20 minutes ago. Get some rest. You'll be called in for a full debriefing later today." James saluted and turned to leave, but Collins stopped him once more. "Carter, one more thing. She asked about you specifically. Wanted to know your record, your background, how long you'd been posted here. That doesn't happen often. Whatever impression you made tonight, it was a good one. Don't waste it." As James walked back to the guard quarters, his mind was racing. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. But sleep wouldn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Anne standing in that stable doorway, fearless and commanding. He thought about what Collins had said. The official story versus the truth. He understood the need for discretion, but something about it bothered him. People should know. They should know that she hadn't just stood by, that she had fought, that she had cared enough to risk herself. But orders were orders, and James was good at following orders. 3 days passed. The incident was mentioned briefly in one small newspaper article buried on page 12. Security incident at Windsor resolved. 2 men arrested for trespassing. No royals endangered, that was all. The world moved on, never knowing what had really happened. James returned to his regular duties, night shifts at various posts around the castle grounds. Every time he passed the stables, he thought about that night. About the fear and the pride and the way Princess Anne had looked at him when she said he'd done well. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. James was in the guardhouse, finishing paperwork before his shift, when Collins appeared in the doorway. "Carter, you're being reassigned." Reassigned usually meant he'd done something wrong. Maybe his hesitation had been noticed after all. Maybe the official report hadn't been as favorable as Collins had implied. "Sir, if this is about the stable incident, it is." Collins handed him a folder. "You're being moved to the inner detail. Personal protection rotation. Effective immediately." James stared at the folder like it might bite him. Inner detail was reserved for the most experienced, most trusted guards. It meant closer proximity to the royal family, higher responsibility, better pay, career advancement. "I don't understand, sir. I'm not senior enough for inner detail. Apparently someone thinks you are." Collins almost smiled. The request came from high up. Very high up. Specifically requested that you be included in the rotation for royal equestrian events and stable security. The meaning was clear. Anne had requested him, James felt a mix of pride and terror. "I won't let her down, sir. See that you don't. Report to Captain Morrison in the morning. He'll brief you on your new duties." Collins paused at the door. "Oh, and Carter. You'll be accompanying Princess Anne to a horse show next week. Try not to freeze up this time." The next 6 days were a blur of new protocols, additional training, and meetings with senior officers who all seemed to regard James with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He was the new guy, the young guard, who somehow impressed a princess. He could feel the questions in their eyes. Did he really deserve this? Or was it just luck? James wondered the same thing himself. The morning of the horse show arrived cold and bright. James stood in his dress uniform, one of 4 guards assigned to accompany Princess Anne to the event. It was being held at a private estate 40 minutes from Windsor, a smaller affair, but still requiring full security protocol. And emerged from the residence precisely on time, dressed in riding attire with a long coat. She acknowledged the guards with a brief nod and headed for the waiting car. As she passed James, she spoke without looking at him. "Don't look so nervous, Carter. It's just horses." He couldn't help it. Smiled. The horse show was everything James had expected and nothing he was prepared for. The crowd was smaller than public events, but these people were different. Wealthy landowners, competitive riders, people who moved in circles where meeting royalty was just another Tuesday. James and the other guards maintained a discreet perimeter as Anne moved through the grounds. She was in her element here, talking easily with other riders, examining horses with an expert's eye, laughing at jokes James couldn't hear. This was her world. She belonged to it completely. The event was going smoothly until just after noon. James noticed the man first. He stood out because he didn't fit. Everyone else wore country attire, riding boots, waxed jackets. This man wore jeans and a dark hoodie, pulled up despite the mild weather. He was standing near the stable area, watching Anne with an intensity that made James's instincts flare. The same instincts Anne had told him to trust. James spoke quietly into his radio. Possible concern near the east stables. Male mid-20s, dark hoodie, not dressed for the event. Watching the princess. The response came back immediately. Copy that. Moving to intercept. But before anyone could reach the man, he started moving, not away. Toward Anne. James broke protocol. He left his position and moved quickly through the crowd, keeping the man in sight. Anne was standing beside a stable door, speaking with an older gentleman about a horse. She hadn't seen the approaching figure. The man's hand went into his hoodie pocket. James's training took over. He closed the distance fast, positioning himself between Anne. The other guard noticed and moved in from the opposite side. "Sir, I need you to stop right there," James said firmly but calmly. The man looked startled. His hand jerked out of his pocket, and James tensed, ready for anything. Out. But what emerged wasn't a weapon. It was a phone. "Just wanted a photo," the man said, his voice defensive and slightly slurred. "She's right there. Just wanted one photo." Behind James, Anne's voice cut through the tension. "Carter, what's happening?" James didn't turn around. "Security matter, ma'am. Please step back." The man with the phone was looking between James and Anne, his expression turning stubborn. "I'm not doing anything wrong. It's a public event. I can take photos." "This is a private event, sir," the other guard, a veteran named Thompson, said evenly. "You need to leave. I was invited. My boss got tickets. I've every right you've been drinking," James observed quietly. He could smell it now, faint but unmistakable. The man's face flushed red. "So what? That's not illegal. I'm not driving." "I'm just trying to get one bloody photo of the princess. Is that a crime?" A crowd was starting to form, curious faces turning toward the commotion. This was exactly what security wanted to avoid. A scene, questions, attention. Anne stepped forward, and James felt his heart rate spike. "Ma'am, please, it's all right, Carter." She moved to stand beside him, not behind him. She looked at the man with the phone, her expression neutral but assessing. "You want a photo?" The man blinked, surprised. "Well, yeah, yes. If that's okay." "No," Anne said simply. "It's not okay. This is a private event. You're intoxicated. You're making my security team uncomfortable. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put that phone away. You're going to leave quietly with these gentlemen, and you're going to sober up. If you cooperate, this doesn't become an incident. Do we understand each other?" The man stared at her. For a moment, James thought he might argue, and something in Anne's steady gaze made him deflate. "Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to apology accepted. Thompson, please escort this gentleman to his vehicle and ensure he calls a taxi." Thompson nodded and gently guided the man away. The crowd, sensing the excitement was over, began to disperse. Anne turned to James, and he expected a reprimand for breaking position. Instead, she said, "Good instincts." Again. "I saw him watching you, ma'am. Something felt off. It was off. He was drunk and behaving inappropriately. You spotted it. You acted, and you didn't escalate unnecessarily." She glanced toward where Thompson was still dealing with the man. "Most guards would have tackled him the moment he reached into his pocket. You assessed the situation first." James felt a warmth spread through his chest. Pride, but something else too. Respect. She respected his judgment. The rest of the event passed without incident. Anne competed in 2 classes, rode beautifully, and placed second in both. She accepted the ribbons with grace and genuine pleasure, posing for official photographs and chatting with organizers as they prepared to leave. The sun beginning to set, Anne paused beside the car. She looked at James, really looked at him in a way that made him feel seen. "You've adapted well to the new assignment," she said quietly, away from the others. "I've been watching. You don't just follow protocol, you think. That's rare." "Thank you, ma'am." "I'm trying to live up to the opportunity. You're doing more than that." She hesitated, which was unusual for her. "The night in the stables, you saw me at my most unguarded, most unprincess-like, as my mother would say. Could have been embarrassing. But you've never treated me differently because of it." "Ma'am, what I saw that night was someone protecting what they love. There's nothing embarrassing about that." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. Most people see the title first. The person second, if at all. You see it the other way around? Don't lose that, Carter, no matter how long you do this job. She climbed into the car, and they drove back to Windsor in comfortable silence. James stared out the window, watching. The countryside rolled past and thought about what she'd said. He'd spent his entire career learning to see royalty as symbols, as duties, as assignments to be protected. But that night in the stables had changed something fundamental. He'd seen a person, a brave, fierce, complicated person who just happened to be a princess. And maybe that made all the difference. 6 months passed. James settled into his role on the inner detail, becoming one of Princess Anne's regular security escorts. He accompanied her to horse shows, charity events, and official engagements. Each assignment taught him something new. Not just about security, but about her. He learned that she had no patience for incompetence, but infinite patience for honesty. That she remembered names of stable hands and grooms, but forgot the titles of dignitaries. That she could be cutting and funny and fierce, often in the same sentence. And he learned that the night in the stables wasn't an anomaly. It was who she was. Always the anniversary of the stable incident arrived quietly. James was on night duty again, stationed near the same post where it had all begun. The irony wasn't lost on him. 1 year ago, he'd been an uncertain young guard who hesitated. Now, he was trusted, confident. Changed around midnight, he heard footsteps. He turned, instinctively alert, and saw an approaching. She was alone, wearing the same type of practical clothing she'd worn that night. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" "Fine, Carter. Just checking on Columbus. He's been restless this evening." They walked to the stables together, the night air cool and filled with the familiar sounds of horses settling. Anne went straight to Columbus's stall. The magnificent stallion nickered softly and pushed his nose against her hand. "He remembers, you know," Anne said quietly. Animals remember fear, but they also remember being protected. James stood respectfully back, giving her space. "He's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other." She stroked the horse's mane, her movements gentle. Do you ever think about that night? Often, ma'am. Do you regret how it happened? The danger? The chaos? James considered the question carefully. No, ma'am. I regret my hesitation, but I don't regret what came after. It taught me what real courage looks like. Anne turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Carter. It's acting despite it. You were afraid that night? So was I, but we both acted anyway. That's what mattered. You didn't seem afraid, ma'am, and I'm a better actress than I thought. She smiled slightly. I was terrified. Not of the intruders, but of what might happen if I failed. If they hurt Columbus or the other horses, if someone got injured because I acted too hastily. That's the weight of responsibility. We carry it whether we wear a crown or a uniform. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Columbus settle. Then Anne spoke again, her voice softer. I never properly thanked you. For that night, for chasing that man down when I ordered you to, for not questioning, for just acting. Ma'am, you don't need to thank me. I was doing my job. Your job is to protect the royal family. But that night, you protected my family. There's a difference. She gestured to Columbus. He's not just a horse to me. None of them are. They're what I love when everything else is duty and obligation and protocol. You understood that immediately. Not everyone would have. James felt his throat tighten with emotion. It was an honor, ma'am. Collins told me something interesting last week. He said you've been offered a promotion. Transferred to Buckingham Palace. More prestigious assignment, better career prospects. James nodded. The offer had come 3 days ago. It was everything a royal guard could want. But something had held him back from accepting immediately. Are you taking it? Anne asked. I'm not sure yet, ma'am. Why not? He chose his words carefully. Because Buckingham Palace is protocol and ceremony and state occasions, and that's important. But here, with you, the work feels more real. Protecting a person, not just a title. Anne was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. That's the kindest thing anyone has said to me in years. She turned away from Columbus's stall and faced James directly. Whatever you decide about the promotion, know this. You've been an exemplary guard. But more than that, you've been someone I can trust to see the situation, not just the protocol. That's rare and valuable. And if you choose to stay, I'd be grateful. If you choose to go, I'll understand and support you completely. Thank you, ma'am. And Carter. If you do stay, stop calling me ma'am every other sentence. You've earned the right to relax a bit. There was humor in her eyes, at least when we're alone with the horses. James couldn't help but smile. Yes, Ma, I'll try to remember that. She laughed, a genuine sound that echoed softly in the quiet stable. One step at a time, I suppose. As an LF2 returned to the residence, James remained by Columbus's stall for a few more minutes. The stallion had settled completely, his breathing deep and even, protected, safe. James thought about the choice ahead of him. Buckingham Palace represented everything he'd worked for. Status, recognition, a clear path up the ladder. But standing here, in this stable where he'd found his courage and his purpose, the choice didn't feel difficult at all. He knew what he was going to do. 2 days later, James submitted his official response to the promotion offer. He declined it respectfully and requested to remain on the Windsor detail, specifically assigned to Princess Anne's security rotation. Collins called him into his office when he heard the news. You're certain about this, Carter? Buckingham Palace doesn't extend offers twice. I'm certain, sir. Can I ask why? James thought about that night 6 months ago. About Anne standing fearlessly in a stable doorway. About her voice cutting through his doubt with 4 simple words. Don't just stand there, 'cause I found where I belong, sir. And it's not behind a ceremonial post at a palace gate. It's here, doing real work that matters. Collins studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You've grown up, Carter. That's good to see. Years later, when James would tell this story to younger guards, they would always ask the same question. What was it like working for Princess Anne? And he would always answer the same way. It was like serving beside someone who taught you that titles don't make you brave. Actions do. Choices do. Standing up when it matters, speaking truth when it's needed, and protecting what you love with everything you have. That's what he learned from the princess who chased intruders out of her stables and taught a young guard that real courage looks like showing up. Even when you're afraid, especially when you're afraid, James. Carter remained on Princess Anne's security detail for 15 years. He never regretted his choice, not once, because he had found something more valuable than any promotion or prestigious post. He had found purpose and respect, and a profound understanding of what it means to serve someone worth serving, all because of one cold February night. When he heard a noise in the darkness and witnessed a princess become a warrior, the memory of her voice still echoed sometimes in quiet moments. Don't just stand there. Arrest him, and he never stood frozen again.